my name is David Siegel. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about getting out of debt and reorganizing your debt under Chapter 13 bankruptcy laws. Today I'm joined once again with Jesse Barrientes. Welcome, Jesse.
Hey, thanks, Dave.
Chapter 13 is the topic. It's all about getting out of debt or reorganizing your debt to save property that you have and still pay off your creditors over time. Chapter 13, what is your thought?
Well, it's a great opportunity for people who, sometimes you get strapped, you get, in a bad situation, and you really want to pay. And that's what I find. A lot of people, they just really want to pay. They're saddened that they're in this situation, but it affords them an opportunity to pay at least some of the debts that they owe, if not all of them, because sometimes you have a situation where all of the debt can get repaid in the number of time, either 3 years or 5 years, that the plan, carries on.
Yeah, a lot of people get confused on the different chapters, 7, 11, 12, 13. I think it's important to clarify that Chapter 13 is a debt reorganization plan. You're not eliminating your debt 100%,
right?
But you're getting time to repay it, whether that be in full or 10% or some variance in between. But you are keeping your property, repaying your creditors over the next 3 to 5 years. Yeah. So it's a great way to stretch out your debt. But what kind of situations would Chapter 13 be beneficial to someone?
Well, it would be beneficial, for example, if you owned a home and you had too much equity in the home. We had a show not very long ago. We were talking about Chapter 7 and indicating that there's basically a $15,000 per individual exemption for the home, for your the equity that you have that you could.
That's the amount they can keep free and clear while not paying their creditors.
Exactly.
Okay.
And very often, sometimes people fall into the other category where they have maybe more. Maybe it's an older couple, or maybe it's just they have more equity than that, and so they're not an appropriate candidate for a Chapter 7. If we're just talking about that reason, because they just have simply too much equity in the house, but they still want to keep their home. And also, too, with the Chapter 7, you have to be caught up in your mortgage payments, or you got to give the house back, one or the other. But with the Chapter 13, if you're behind, it doesn't matter how far you're behind, all of that arrearage can go into the kitty, and right. to get you out from under that. So it's a really, really good tool, especially in the climate of the times that we have now, to provide some relief.
Yeah, the important thing to note with Chapter 13 is the person or couple must have available money per month. So their income minus their expenses, there has to be something left over that they can contribute to a Chapter 13 trustee to reorganize their debt. A lot of people don't have that ability to reorganize because they just don't have a positive cash flow each month. And those people are better qualified for Chapter 7, Fresh Start, or otherwise liquidating their property if there's equity like you said. So there is a hurdle that they have to get over. They have to have the ability to pay something per month, which is tough.
Well, yeah, and sometimes, you see people, unfortunately, I see people that are in between. Can't do a Chapter 7, can't do a Chapter 13 for the reason that you said. But, you look at the allowable expenses, and after any money that's left after the allowable expenses, that's what you have for the plan that you're going to repay. But the problem, though, is, it's only one of two things. Either make more money, or you spend less. And you have to really, really be lean in a Chapter 13, and to kind of do that for 3 to 5 years can sometimes really, really be a challenge.
Right. The most common use of Chapter 13, and we're seeing it more and more today with the foreclosure crisis, is a home saver case. A case where someone has fallen behind on their mortgage for whatever reason. Maybe they lost their job, maybe they were ill, divorce, some circumstance prevented them from making their mortgage on time, and now they've corrected that situation. Maybe they're back to work, maybe they've become healthy, and now they can make the mortgage payment plus put something away towards the arrearage, but the mortgage company is saying, no, we want one lump sum payment to catch you up.
Right.
Chapter 13 basically says, mortgage company, you're going to take it the way we want to pay you over the next 3 to 5 years, as long as it can pay off all the arrears, and we're going to make our next regularly scheduled mortgage payment once again after we file our case. Perfect scenario is, after 3 to 5 years, the debtor makes the mortgage payment as they always have, the arrearage portion is satisfied through the Chapter 13 trustee payment, and they're out of debt.
Right, and all is as it should be. But when you look at, the other kind of debt that people have along with that, which is pretty good, but this is important to know, we're just talking about that, is that even in a Chapter 13, unlike a Chapter 7, right, that the arrearage goes in the kitty, and that amount, whatever that is, along with some other stuff, which we'll talk about in a little bit here, is what get determined is what the debt is and how that's going to get paid back. But when you look at what needs to happen with the trustee, right, with the kind of amount of money that you send in, right, to the trustee, you have to have enough money to pay back your secured creditors, right?
Yes.
100%, and you have to be able to sustain and pay your mortgage, your first or your second, kind of as you're going along there. So, okay, yeah, I owe this amount of money, but I'm okay now, like you said. So,
yes,
in addition to the plan, I still have to pay my mortgage, but those are part of the allowable expenses that you're allowed to find out exactly what your plan payment's going to be.
Yeah. Importantly, a secured creditor is a creditor that is secured by property. That would be a house. That would be a car. Jewelry, furniture. It's a situation where if the person does not make payments, there's some kind of property or security or collateral that can be taken back. So yes, in a Chapter 13, secured creditors do need to be paid in full. But all the other creditors on the back end, credit cards, medical bills, personal loans, utility bills, those can be paid sometimes less than 100%.
Even the debt I owe to Uncle Mark and Uncle Dan?
Definitely the debt that you owe to your uncles. If they were foolish enough to lend you money, Jesse,
well,
they almost don't deserve to be paid back even 10%.
I know. I wonder where those folks are today. Anyway, if you look at the amount of the plan that we're talking about, right? We look at other debts. So we have maybe we have a nice car, or maybe a couple of cars. So the good thing with the Chapter 13, unlike a Chapter 7, Chapter 7 you reaffirm on it, right, and you continue to pay what you owe. But I think, like you said during the last show, that you have to catch it up, because if you're behind, then you could still lose the vehicle. With the Chapter 13, if you own the car, not that it's leased, right, but that you own it, the whole amount of what you owe gets poured back into the kitty.
Yes, you're basically restructuring to a certain extent your auto financing. Instead of making the payment that you signed up for when you bought the vehicle, it gets lumped into this Chapter 13 repayment plan, which if it stretches out for 60 months, that's longer than a normal auto finance or auto lease.
Sure.
You're actually reducing the amount that you're paying per month to the vehicle. And sometimes even greater than that, you're paying only the secured portion back in certain cases in full, and you're paying the unsecured portion as a percentage. So it's just a great way to save a home, vehicle, and otherwise organize your debt if you have available money per month. That is the key. You have to budget.
So in 36 or 60 months, I won't have to worry about my car will be paid in full.
Your car will be paid, your mortgage will be reinstated in full, and your other debt will be eliminated, either by paying it in full or a lesser percentage.
Now let's talk about that lesser percentage. Now that depends upon how much money is available, because the priority creditors, the secured creditors, are going to get paid first.
That's right. For benefit of the show, it's really impossible for us to do a mathematical calculation that's necessary in a Chapter 13 case, but suffice to say, the creditors are going to get paid back either 100% if you have the ability to pay them back 100%, or less than that if your budget and your income doesn't allow you to pay them back 100%, and if you don't have significant equity. So there's a whole mathematical formula, but for the majority of people, they do pay back less than 100% over time.
And they save their house.
They save their house, they save their car, they keep a roof over their head, they're able to support their family, and the creditors, while they're being paid through this repayment plan, are not allowed to sue, garnish, harass, charge excessive interest. They have to wait and be paid under Chapter 13 bankruptcy laws.
So in a Chapter 13, I can't change the interest rate that I've negotiated in the initial loan the initial mortgage?
As of right now, whatever your mortgage contract is for, that's the amount that you have to pay each month on an ongoing basis. And whatever arrearage portion, that's the part that you fell behind, has to be paid back 100%.
Is that the same for my vehicle?
No, it's a little bit different for the vehicle. On a newer vehicle purchase, you're going to have to pay it back in full. On an older vehicle purchase that you've had for more than 2.5 years, you can pay back the secured portion at 100%, and whatever unsecured portion there is, you can reduce that down to as low as 10% in certain cases.
What do you mean secured portion and unsecured portion of the vehicle?
Well, let's say you have a vehicle that you owe $20,000 on, and it has a market value of $15,000.
So I'm upside down on that.
Yes, the secured portion would be the $15,000 what the vehicle is worth. The remaining $5,000 would be the unsecured portion. Because if you return that car back to the finance company, they would only be able to get $15,000 for it at auction. They would have to eat the other $5,000.
So is that what you call a cram down? You're cramming it down?
That is a cram down to
Right.
a certain extent, yes.
Sure.
You're paying them whatever the secured market value is, and then any overage you're throwing into this pot, which potentially could pay less than in full.
But that's only with the car that you own. With the lease car, it doesn't work that way, does it?
Right. A lease car is just that. You don't own it. You are renting it, just like you're renting an apartment. Mm-hmm. So you have to continue to make your rental or lease payment outside of the bankruptcy like you always have. It's just a financed vehicle that gets put into your consolidated payment to the trustee, along with all of your other debt.
So this is a good way, even at the last minute, to save your home.
Yes, you can wait all the way up until the sale date, which I don't recommend, but as long as you file the Chapter 13 before your home has gone to a sale.
Well, how are they going to know? Let's say the sale is tomorrow at noon.
Well, remember, a sale date happens at the very end of a long, protracted foreclosure process.
Right.
So
after
by this
the redemption
time,
period and everything else is expired.
Yes, the homeowner by this time has received a summons about 7 to 11 months prior.
Yeah, but you know what? They get that summons, and you see a lot of people. It's very strange because sometimes they get, folks, they call me up for some other things and say, "Oh yeah, I got a court date." Okay, great. When is it? It's tomorrow.
Right.
And you know what happens though? Sometimes, they lay it around or whatever. They forget about it because they think that if they don't pay attention to it, it's just going to go away.
Right. In my experience, there's a lot of things that happen in a foreclosure case where the debtor doesn't know exactly what's happening, and they kind of ignore that. But the good news is that most debtors, most people who owe money, do know what a sheriff's sale is. And when they get that notice, the phones ring because they know sheriff's sale, they're going to lose their house.
And at that point, so if you have a little time, even if it's a day or so, and you file that Chapter 13, they have to stop the sale.
That's right. I have filed cases minutes before the house went into auction. And in those cases, we were able to save the home, at least temporarily, not in every case. Some people just can't make a payment plan once we've given them the opportunity. But there are people who have saved their home on the eve of sale, even on the day of sale, and have come out unscathed through Chapter 13.
Well, let me. This is not really digressing a little bit. I mean, it's important too because we see this all the time as well. You have folks out there who really don't have the money for the Chapter 13, but they want to save their home, and they spent all this time now. They've waited out the process. They haven't paid anything, and now they get their Chapter 13. They can't sustain it. So what happens when you can't sustain it? It'll get dismissed, right?
Right. One of two things will happen. Either the trustee who oversees the Chapter 13 payments will bring a motion to dismiss the case, throw out the case because the debtor, the homeowner, is not complying with the repayment plan. Or what we see more commonly first is the mortgage company will bring a motion to the bankruptcy court asking for permission to avoid the bankruptcy and continue to foreclose because they're not getting their payments. They're going to move a little quicker than the trustee.
They're not getting their payments through the plan.
They're either not getting their payments through the plan,
or they're not getting their regular payments.
Or they're not getting their regular payments, which is more common.
From doing that.
Yeah, remember, Chapter 13 is a tough deal. The homeowner has to make their regular mortgage payment going forward, like they always have, plus make a payment to the trustee. So it's an extra burden. It's very difficult. They must stay employed. They must budget. They must avoid any kind of time off of work or anything that could bring a negative shortfall for a month. They need to avoid that.
Well, what happens though? The people, and you see it. I know you see it. I've seen it. People time and time again are coming back, filing a Chapter 13. How many times can you file a Chapter 13 and still keep the wolves at bay?
Well, you can probably get 1 to 3 shots at it before the creditor finally brings a motion to bar you for 180 days from filing again. And that will allow the mortgage company enough time to foreclose and recover their interest in the property. Now, let me talk about one thing, though, that I think is important with Chapter 13 and why it is so difficult to make these cases work, is that a majority of the Chapter 13 cases that are filed are not people who have lost their job and have become employed, and they're not people who became ill and are now healthy. They're people who sometimes are just living beyond their means, and a Chapter 13 is not going to help. It's just going to prolong the inevitable. If you don't have the income to do a 13 and your budget doesn't show available money, you're doomed to fail.
Well, what happens, because we talked about Chapter 7s before in terms of, hey, listen, just don't have the money, complete discharge, and everything else. And, if you make a certain income, you're presumed that you can't do a Chapter 7, in fact, and you're going to be stuck with the Chapter 13. But you can only do that if you have excess money. So, okay, Chapter 13, I'm making, between my wife and I, we're making a couple $100,000. Have you seen those? Is that what you're talking about in terms of folks living above and beyond?
Well, I don't see incomes that high, but I see debt that high. And it's just a question of people who have overextended themselves on credit cards, or made car purchases where they couldn't really afford to make the payment. Those people have to do something different than a 13. They have to look to liquidate, possibly convert the case to a Chapter 7 and just walk away from some of these items that they don't have the ability to pay. So it really depends on the case, but there's always the ability to convert to Chapter 7 if you would otherwise qualify for a Chapter 7. So in other words, 13 is a good college try in many cases. Sure. And if it doesn't work, you convert to 7.
Can you switch the other way? Say there's this change in my circumstances, and now I would be able to sustain a payment.
You can. It has to be done with court permission, and it has to be an honest change. It can't be because you filed the Chapter 7 and the trustee found an asset that he was going to take, and therefore now you want to do a Chapter 13 to save it. It has to be an honest situation where now you can make the payment, or the trustee's office thinks you have the ability to make the payment, and they would probably convince the court of that. So it's either the 7's going to get thrown out or convert the case to a Chapter 13 and attempt to repay some of your creditors over time.
Well, and much like Chapter 7, you have a requirement before you file, right, of taking your credit counseling class.
Yes, there are some requirements before you file a Chapter 13, one of those being a 1-hour credit counseling session.
And is that the same thing that you would have, the same exact thing that you have with the Chapter 7?
Exactly the same thing. Right. It can be done online, over the telephone, or in person. The average price is about $50. It takes about an hour, and you will get a certificate of completion.
And that's a precursor. You got to do that first before you file it.
You must do that before the case is filed. You must file the last 4 years of income tax returns for Chapter 13.
4 years.
And you must gather your paycheck stubs or other sources of income proof. The attorney will need the most recent 2 months just before filing.
And you have to take another class after you file, but before you get the discharge?
Yes. After your case is filed, but before the case is discharged, you must submit to a 2-hour financial management class so you can learn all about financing.
Oh, how excellent.
Yeah. You might not know the difference between 0% and 29%. You might need to take a class on that.
Isn't the difference 29%?
That's right.
Okay, there you go.
Some people have found that the class is helpful, but I think
Sure.
the majority of people deem it as something they need to do just to get the discharge.
Well, part of the other process, too, which is kind of similar, right, to Chapter 7, is after it gets filed, you have a meeting,
Yes.
meeting of creditors, right?
That's right. You must appear before the trustee in Chapter 13.
And in the Chapter 13, when you appear before them, they're going to look at the plan that you've outlined, and they're going to tweak it and
Yes.
make sure everything is okay. Good example, I think, and this is what I've seen sometimes when you go in. And actually, I think we should just kind of step back and just look at what it is. Your plan payment is determined by the amount of available monies that are left after your allowable expenses. Right?
Right.
So that can be from $100, depending upon your situation, to $1,600.
That's correct.
Or any number in between or above that.
Yes.
Again, it's individual specific, right?
Yes, and the trustee is the one charged with the duty of making sure that the person is putting all of their disposable income towards the repayment plan. So the trustee is going to look at the paycheck stubs. The trustee is going to make sure that income is accurate, and then they're going to scrutinize the expenses based on IRS standards. So you couldn't put $800 for food for one person.
Well,
it's excessive.
What if I were a big person?
You are a big person.
What if I were a bigger person?
Well, you have to change your budget, at least in terms of the Chapter 13 trustee's eyes, and spend a little bit less on food, a little bit less lobster, a little bit more mac and cheese, and ramen noodles.
Okay. Well, yeah, those are pretty good. Some of the things that I've seen in the trustee, the meeting, right,
Yes.
is that they'll tweak. I guess example would be your contribution to your retirement. If it is a voluntary contribution, they're going to require you to stop making that contribution until your plan has been concluded.
Yeah.
right? And if it's mandatory, then you're okay. And so those are some of the little tweaks they're going to do. And very often, in fact, they make you come back, don't they, and modify the plan in various ways.
Yeah, you basically have to stick with the basics for your expenses. For example, if you give money to church and you tithe, they're going to want to see proof of it. If you give money to charity, they're going to want to see proof. If you have an excessive medical bill, or ongoing medical expenses rather, or high utilities, they're going to want to see proof that you're not just increasing those numbers so that you would pay less per month to your creditors.
So basically what they're looking at is for the charity contributions and your tithes and all that stuff is if I've always paid 10% based upon my income and it fluctuated, then, and I did that before the bankruptcy and substantially before, right? Then I'm okay. Then that's not going to be a problem. If all of a sudden I decided, hey, listen, it'd be a really good idea to to give my church X amount of dollars when I've never done that before, then they're going to be suspicious.
That's correct. You have to justify all of your expenses. But once everything is mathematically formulated between your income and expenses, that's the dollar figure that you as a debtor would be required to pay each month. So you really can't save for yourself. You can't live extravagantly. And you're talking about a 3 to 5 year payment plan. It's a tough thing to do.
I can't have, are part of my expenses some recreation?
Not in a Chapter 13. You're not allowed to have any fun when you're in a Chapter 13.
No fun?
No fun.
When you're in Chapter 13?
No, because here's the deal. You're restricting your creditors. You're making them wait 3 to 5 years to get paid. So why should you have any fun? Why should you be able to go on vacation? Why should you be able to eat that steak and lobster that I mentioned earlier? You have to be fair. You have to live within a budget, according to the IRS guidelines, and then whatever else is available, that has to go to the trustee to go towards your creditors. That's the only fair way to do it.
Now, what happens if I'm tired of eating ramen noodles and my situation changes?
Situation changes for the worse? You can't make your payments?
Well, let's take that. Sure, it changes for the worse. I suppose I'd be eating more ramen noodles, but if it changes for the worse, right? Now what am I going to do? I can't make that planned payment.
Okay, there's a couple of things we can do. If your income changes or something like that, we can try and bring a motion to reduce the amount you pay per month. If it's just that you can't stick on the budget, so you don't have available money to pay the trustee, your case is going to wind up being dismissed after a couple to 3 months of non-payment.
No, the boss came in and said, hey, listen, either it's one way or the other. Either I have to reduce your income along with everybody else for you to keep your job because we're having some hard times, or I got to lay you off.
Okay. Well,
so now my income is reduced. But if you go in to do to amend the plan payment to try to reduce it, don't you still have to be able to sustain what you had to before, which is you have to be able to pay off your secured creditors 100% of that debt?
Secured creditors, yes, 100%. But a modified plan could actually lower the amount that you're paying the unsecured creditors in this situation.
What's the least that you can pay your unsecured creditors?
The general minimum is 10%, although there have been cases that have been confirmed and have paid out less than 10%, but that is not anything I would look for.
That's the exception rather than the rule.
That's right. Plan on 10% to 100%.
Paying back.
Pay back over time, 3 to 5 years.
Okay, now let's, I guess then it would work the same way if there was a positive benefit, increase in income or something like that. Then what would happen is, well,
technically you're supposed to notify your
attorney.
What
I want to tell you about that, right?
Typically a debtor is not going to call their attorney and say, look, I just got a raise of $20 per week, therefore I can pay $20 per more each week to my Chapter 13. They're going to then pocket that money usually and have a little cushion. So,
a little cushion.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask, what happens then in this situation? I'm in the middle of a Chapter 13, and am I able to sell my house?
Yes, you are able to sell your house, but you need to get court permission first. And then once you receive that court permission, the house could be sold. Any net proceeds would first go to pay off your Chapter 13 balance.
You mean the balance of what the plan would be if it was accelerated?
Yes, you would not be able to keep the additional profit. It would first have to go to your Chapter 13 and basically come out of bankruptcy if possible. And then if there was an overage, you would receive that. But selling the house would just maybe help you pay the Chapter 13 off quicker, escape from the Chapter 13, get out of debt, get back on your feet, start to be able to save again.
Sure. Would the Would the Chapter 13 trustee really sell some of my property? What if I had this just really nice sports car?
No, Chapter 13, you will be able to keep all of your property
Everything.
as long as you're committing all of your disposable income towards that repayment plan.
What if I was a little bit over here for example, where I've got this car that's just a outrageously expensive car, similar to yours, Dave, and and I just can't sustain the payments. Is the trustee going to make me get rid of it or liquidate it or whatever if it's going to interfere with the plan?
No, you can keep your vehicle, but if it's an extravagant or luxury vehicle, you're going to probably have to pay a higher percentage to the unsecured creditors, possibly even with some interest, if you have a luxury vehicle.
Well, then Chapter 13 is the way to go if you want to save your house and you have too much equity, and you can't otherwise do a Chapter 7.
Yeah, you can never have too much equity, but you just don't want any unsecured debt as well.
Good enough.
And basically 3 to 5 years is how long that you can repay it. But you have to make your regular mortgage payment again, either first and or second, and put money towards a Chapter 13 trustee, and you must do that consistently for the next 3 to 5 years. So it's not something that's easy. It's very hard to complete, but if you're diligent and you can budget and you've got some good luck in your life between employment and health and maybe a spouse helping too, you can come out of Chapter 13 and keep all of your property and keep the creditors off your back.
Excellent.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend Chapter 13 for a homeowner who's trying to save a home in foreclosure or someone who has significant equity in their property.
Well, I mean, I think that as it says, if you, for example, what happens at the end of the bankruptcy? What happens at the end of the 5-year period? Does it just drop off and I'm finished? Do I get a certificate?
Yes.
What happens?
Once you complete your payment plan, you will receive a discharge letter, as will all the creditors and your counsel, which is proof that your case has gone through to completion. Nobody can bother you on those debts again. And here's one of the benefits that I should mention that I failed to mention. Once you file a Chapter 13, creditors have an opportunity to file a proof of claim to be part of the payout. If creditors don't file a proof of claim, they don't submit anything to the court to be part of the payout, and you complete your case, those creditors are eliminated in full because they didn't file a claim, they weren't part of the payout, and they had an opportunity to do so.
And those would be unsecured creditors?
Those would be unsecured creditors that are completely eliminated. They got paid back nothing because they didn't choose to be part of the case. And that happens more often than you would think, where creditors just don't file a claim because they don't think it's worth their time to get 10 cents on the dollar, or they just don't have the administration to do it.
So when you really look at it like that, in that perspective, sometimes you're even paying less than the 10% if that's what your plan is, because you get creditors who are not even going to go and
After about
participate.
6 months, when the claims period is ended, we get a listing of all the creditors who filed claims, as does my client. And sometimes they call me and they say, these are the only people who filed a claim? What happened to all the other ones? Well, they didn't file a claim. So they're dropped off. So now it's on you to complete your case.
So that's better for them, and if they complete it, then they're out of luck.
Absolutely.
But if you don't complete your case, they can come back, can't they?
That's right. That's right. You have to complete your case to get your discharge. Yep, Chapter 13 is great. It works for a lot of people. Thanks for joining us. My name is David Siegel, along with Jesse Barrientes. We'll see you next time. Take care.